How's it going, everyone? I am Dylan. This is All You Can Board, and it's time to talk more Marvel Champions, and that's because we have a new hero announced, which is Storm. I'm a couple days late on this one. The saga continues. They just keep dropping these articles when I just have too much going on. This is one of the busiest weeks for me at work in my full-time job in a while, and I just couldn't get to it till now. So thank you for your patience, but let's talk Storm. We're going to have some fun today. Like I've mentioned before, the X-Men are characters that I'm not super familiar with. I know the big ones, like I knew Storm, I knew Wolverine, Cyclops, Beast, like all those. I don't know their histories, I don't know their backstories. So to me, whereas like with some characters like Spider-Man, I have a bit of an idea coming in, like, hey, how are they going to tie all this in thematically? I haven't always felt that way with the X-Men. I wasn't sure how certain things were going to tie in thematically, or what the theme was really going to be that comes out in these cards that differentiates it from pack to pack. Storm was one, however, that I had seen some discussion in comments on Reddit in our Discord channel, and I had thought myself, like, obviously we knew there was going to be a weather tie-in, and so the idea of environments being in play was something that had been tossed around, talked about. That's kind of what we end up getting here, but it is a little bit different. There's going to be a separate weather deck, sort of like how Doctor Strange has his own separate deck, that you're going to be pulling different weather environments off of, putting them into play and kind of switching them out. Each one's going to have a persistent ability that's affecting every single character that's in play, enemy or friendly, and they also have a special ability that's going to trigger from your actual hero ability that's on your hero card, as well as some of your other cards in play. So let's jump right in. There's a lot of cool stuff to talk about here. As always, we're going to start with the alter ego, which is Ororo Munroe. This is a 3 recovery card. Not a lot of abilities on this card. It's just basically setting up the weather deck. So it says Ororo Munroe begins the game with a weather deck. See the insert. So you're going to have this, I think it's a 4-card weather deck if I'm not mistaken. Then you have I Feel a Storm Coming, which is just a setup ability that says choose a support from the weather deck and put it into play. So essentially, every time you play with this hero, you are going to start the game with one of the weather environments in play that you choose out of the 4, whichever one you want to start the game with. That's how it's going to go. Not a lot more to talk about on this side. The hit points are 10, which is pretty average. The hand size is 6, and we'll go to 5 on the hero side. So everything else is pretty standard, and there's not really much of an ability here. So not overall an exciting alter ego, but again, it's mostly just setting up the weather cards, the weather deck. So let's jump into the hero side, which is of course Storm. The stat line here is 1 thwart, 2 attack, 1 defense, which is a bit on the lower side. We do get the higher attack. Weather control is the ability. Action, swap your weather support in play with a support of your choice from the weather deck. Then resolve the special ability on your weather support that is in play. You can do this only once per round. So essentially, every time you're in hero form, you will have the option every single turn to flip through your weather environment, whichever card is in play, into another one, and whichever new one comes into play, you're going to also get to trigger that special ability. So the things you're managing here is not only what the persistent effect is that you want in play at that moment, it's when you're going to do that switch, because again, you don't have to do this as like the very beginning thing on your turn. You could start the game or start your turn with one of these weather cards already in play, utilize whatever its persistent effect is, maybe trigger its special ability, whatever you want to do, then use your hero ability to switch in a new one, which is going to trigger that special ability. Maybe you're going to get some sort of bonus off that persistent effect. So in many cases, you're going to end up having played with 2, if not more, weather environments that come into play on your turn, on a single turn. So managing not only which one's in play, but when you bring them into play, and you know how much you utilize of one before you switch over is going to be a big thing with Storm, it seems like. Other than that, the hit points, like I said before, are 10, and the hand size goes down to 5. And as we'll see from all the other cards we're going to get into, most of what you're doing with Storm that makes Storm unique is interacting with these weather cards. Okay, so we've got some weather cards to talk about, obviously. So we're going to talk about all 4 of them so you can understand what these persistent abilities are. First one is Clear Skies. These are all permanent. This one's pretty simple. It is each character gains a Stalwart. That is every character gaining Stalwart. And special, draw 1 card. So anytime you trigger that special, you're going to have an additional card draw, which means if you can trigger that multiple times, this may be the one you want in play to fill up your hand to be able to do more on your turn. Really good special ability. Then we've got Hurricane. This says each character gains Retaliate 1, and the special is remove 2 threat from a scheme. So this is the one you want to play if you're needing to have some extra support in dealing with the schemes that are in play, removing some of that threat. And having that Retaliate, I think, is going to be a little bit more situational than some of the other weather environments. But what's funny is I'm calling these weather environments just because that makes sense to me, but they're actually just weather support cards, not actually weather environments. But I'm probably going to keep doing that for the rest of the video, so you're just going to have to put up with me. The Retaliate one, I think, is a little bit more situational than some of the other ones we're going to see. It's only going to be in, these specific cases, which is kind of like Retaliate in general for me, where it's going to make sense for you to have Retaliate to be able to, deal some of that extra damage. But it's still nice to have that option of one of those cards in your weather deck. Then we've got Thunderstorm. This is your offensive one. Each character gains +1 attack, and the special is deal 2 damage to an enemy. And again, I'm going to remind you guys, with these, it's every single character. That's not only friendly, that's also the enemies. So it's not just, hey, I get to boost all my, my hero and all my allies' attack. It's like, yes, you do, but you're also going to boost the enemy attack. So sometimes what you're going to want to do is do all your attacks with Thunderstorm in play, for instance, and then say switch it to another one. Maybe that's Retaliate, something that is not going to benefit the villain before it gets to their turn, so that you can kind of like get the most out of an environment support card, and then move it on to something else that won't affect you so much on the villain's turn. But having that special of deal 2 damage to enemy, if you can trigger that multiple times, this is just an extra source of consistent damage. Having this in play, I think this is one that you're going to probably turn to a lot, especially if you are the primary damage dealer or if you're playing solo, to be able to wear down that villain. And then finally, we have Blizzard. This says each character gains -1 attack, which means this is probably one you'd love to switch to when you're heading to the villain's turn, not when you're on your turn. Maybe as your turn ends, you switch to Blizzard, hinder the villain after you've had your attack boost. So I think that's probably going to be a common thing to do, is do most of your turn in Thunderstorm, switch to Blizzard when you head into the villain turn. The special here, choose a non-elite minion. Until the end of the round, treat that minion's text box as if it were blank. So if you have any minions in play that are giving you a hassle because of their abilities, because of their text box, you can essentially wipe them off, just make them plain minions with no ability. Again, a little situational, but again, I don't know that it's the special you're going to be using Blizzard for as much, even because that is maybe a little more fringe, a little more situational. It's going to be probably the persistent -1 attack as something you want to have in play as you head to the villain turn. Okay, so those are the weather deck cards, the 4 of them. Let's go into some of the actual Storm cards. The first one is a Weather Goddess. This is a 0-cost event, hero action. Swap your weather support in play with a support of your choice from the weather deck. Resolve the special ability of your weather support in play. So this is essentially your ability that's on your hero card. It's basically word for word the same thing, and it's a 0-cost event to do that. So this is going to be your tool to essentially do multiple weather switches per turn. What's cool about this is your turn is going to become a little bit more complicated, even than you may have already noticed with certain heroes that are kind of known for being complicated or more complex, because it's going to be not only which weather do you want to play. If you're going to have the potential to say have 3 different weather environments hit play over the course of your turn, or maybe even all 4 depending on how many copies of this you have and whatnot, it's the order you do it in. It's what you do while that weather is in play before you switch to the next one. Which special abilities are you really wanting to trigger? Do you need that extra card draw? Do you need to wipe a minion's text box? Like, you have to. The order is going to matter on everything you do with Storm a lot. So in that sense, this may be one that ends up being a little bit more of a complex hero for some people compared to, as an entry-level hero. Maybe that's not going to, be the best spot for Storm, because you're going to have to be thinking like multiple cards ahead and think, okay, do I want to go to Blizzard now? I know I want to go to Blizzard at the end, but maybe I also want to wipe that text box. So when am I doing that transition? And it's just going to be an interesting little puzzle to solve, which is exciting to have that on a single hero. I like when you have to kind of like not only figure out what you're going to do to win the game, but also how you're going to manage your single turn if you're playing solo or if you're playing multiplayer. Then we've got Storm's Crown. We're going to get a couple cards here looking at Storm's Kit. This is the first one. It's a 2-cost upgrade. Pretty simple. Storm gets +1 thwart, so having that base 1 thwart is low to begin with. Now you get to boost that to a 2. Hero resource, exhaust Storm's Crown. Generate the printed resource on your weather support. So essentially this is like, if you just ignore the minor complexity of that hero resource, it's essentially just generating you a resource. If it matters to you what that resource is, then you're going to start to time which weather environments are in play when. But in general, this is just gain +1 thwart and exhaust it to gain a resource. We've seen cards like that before. This is a pretty standard kit card. It's nothing like overly special, but boosting that base 1 thwart to a 2 is pretty important, especially if that's something you're going to have to be if people are going to be relying on you to take care of threat, or if you are playing solo and you need to manage that yourself. Pretty important. Then we've got Storm's Cape. So this is a 3-cost upgrade. Storm gets +1 defense, which again boosts it to a 2, which means if you have both these in play, you have 2s across the board for your base stats. And you also gain the aerial trait. I love when they just tack these aerial traits onto cards and then provide no other aerial cards in the deck, which obviously the point is the deck build around it, but it's just funny to me because I understand why they add aerial. It's thematic when you have like something like a cape or wings or whatever, that's like, okay, well, this card needs to give them aerial. But it just seems like when whenever I first read it, I think, oh, cool, there's gonna be some aerial component to this deck, and there never is. It's just the only aerial component is just we've added the trait. So if you love the aerial trait, if you love utilizing it, this is a character that can get aerial, and you can deck build around it. Hero response: after you resolve the special ability on your weather support, exhaust Storm's Cape to ready Storm. This is really good. You're going to be resolving those special abilities often, at minimum once per turn probably, because you have the capability to do that on your hero card by itself, let alone the other ways you might do that. So you're always going to be able to trigger this cape, and to be able to trigger it and get an extra ready on Storm, especially if you've boosted those stats and there's more you can do with her, that's obviously important. So this is a key kit card. It's not like some of the overpowered ones we've seen from certain heroes or anything like that. It doesn't seem like it, and the cost is, you know, on the higher end, but I think it'll be important for you to have this in play as early as possible. Then we've got Torrential Rain. This is a 2-cost event. It's a superpower, and it's a hero action thwart. Remove 3 threat from among schemes in play. If Hurricane is in play, resolve its special ability. So we're going to see a couple cards like this that basically do something, but if you have a specific weather support in play, they do more, which is triggering that special ability. So being able to remove 3 threat for 2 is something, that is not something we haven't seen before. We have seen that many times. From it being among schemes in play is pretty cool, rather than it just targeting one scheme. I mean, you can target one scheme, but you essentially have the flexibility to divide this however you choose. I think that's a really cool distinction and really important to make this card a little more flexible. On top of that, being able to automatically trigger Hurricane, which also removes 2 threat from a scheme, essentially turns this into a 2-cost remove 5 threat from a scheme. So that's really good, and this is going to be part of that puzzle of when do you want to have certain weather support cards in play, depending on what's in your hand, and what are you going to play from your hand before you switch those weather environments. I think you'll have a fun time kind of solving that puzzle each turn. Then we've got Flash Freeze, very similar. This is a 1-cost event. Hero Interrupt Defense. When the villain attacks you, the villain and each minion engaged with you get -3 attack while attacking you this phase. If Blizzard is in play, resolve its special ability. So essentially, for 1 cost, you're going to reduce their attack by -3, and if Blizzard's in play, it's going to be I was thinking the special ability was -1. Then you're going to be able to also wipe one of the text boxes on one of the minions in play. So you're really using Blizzard in conjunction with Flash Freeze to just hinder everything that's going on with the villain's board, the minions that are engaged with you, to make it so that you don't have as nasty a time before it gets back to you. It's a really good card for 1 cost. For 1 cost to reduce each minion engaged with you and the villain by -3 attack. In many cases, that could just wipe off all the attack coming your way aside from boost cards. That's really, really good. And then of course, if you have Blizzard, wiping a text box on top of that is just gravy. So really cool card, really good. Then we've got a Blast of Wind. This is a 3-cost event. Choose a player, deal 3 damage to the villain and each minion engaged with that player. Resolve the special ability of your weather support. So this one is kind of like the ones we just looked at, except it will resolve whichever weather support is in play. It doesn't have to be any specific one. You just get an additional resolve of that special ability. But on top of that, for 3, you're dealing 3 damage to the villain and each minion engaged. Now this is a steeper cost at 3. If you only have 1 minion engaged or 0, this is really, really inefficient unless that special ability is really important to you to trigger. This otherwise to me seems like a very situational card where it's a board wipe. You essentially are going to play this. The 3 damage to the villain is just kind of extra. It's not really what matters. What matters is that you're doing 3 damage to every minion engaged with that player that you've chosen. If you have a situation where a whole bunch of Ultron bots, a whole bunch of nasty 3 health and lower minions are engaged with one person, being able to wipe them all off with 1 and then also trigger a special ability is really, really good. So I think you're going to only use this in those specific situations, but when those situations arise, you're going to be really happy this card's in the deck. Okay, we're going to move on to the leadership cards. I didn't mention at the start, this is a leadership pre-built deck that Storm comes with, and the first one we're going to look at is a 1-cost event called To Me, My X-Men. This is a tactic card, play only if your identity has the X-Men trait. We're getting a bunch more X-Men support cards here. Hero action, search the top 5 cards of your deck for an X-Men ally and put it into play. If that ally is still in play at the end of the phase, add it to your hand. Really, really interesting card here. I love this for many reasons, because when I started to read this, I thought it was going to end with, if it's still in play at the end of the phase, discard it, essentially. It's destroyed. Because that we've kind of seen before. The fact that this gets added to your hand means not only are you cheating out an X-Men ally, potentially that it costs a lot more for a lot cheaper, if that X-Men ally has an ability that triggers from it entering play, or something that you would want to trigger multiple times, or you just care a lot about getting a use out of that card and then being able to kind of reset those uses or whatever it is, this is a really cool card then, because you're getting that card back to your hand. Yes, if it's a really expensive card, you cheat it out and you're now gonna have to pay for it to play it again. But the fact that you're getting this double dip on an ally that could potentially, you know, if you seem overpowered because of that double dip, because of its ability not normally being, you know, tuned for hitting the table multiple times, it's just really cool. I think this is an awesome card. I think it's going to create some really cool deck building situations where you specifically put in allies that you want to get double uses of, and then you just overwhelm, hopefully, the villain by getting those allies multiple times. So really cool card. Even if it doesn't end up being super powerful, I just love the design of it. Speaking of allies, we got 2 new allies to talk about, which is always exciting. We have the first one is Mirage, a 3 cost, a 2 health ally, 2 thwart, a 1 attack. The response here: after Mirage enters play, choose an enemy whose scheme is less than Mirage's thwart, stun that enemy. So this is, if we didn't have that condition, if this was just when Mirage enters play, stun an enemy, I mean, that would be really, really good. Obviously, that would be potentially too good, so you have to have the stipulation. I think that stipulation is reasonable in the sense that you almost want to deck build and put this into a deck if you're playing a villain that is going to be an option, whether it's only because of stage 1 or stage 2 also has you know, a low scheme, because then you'll always have this target you can hit. You don't have to wait for there to be a minion in play for you to hit, and then if you don't have one, Mirage is kind of a dud. Like, always having that go-to of like, well, I can always stun the villain. And the villain obviously is a great target to stun in the first place. Then this is better because it's not quite a situational. If you're in a scenario where, say, you've gone to like stage 3 and the scheme's higher than 2 and you don't have that guaranteed target, Mirage maybe is a little more up and down, because if you don't have a minion in play, you're essentially just playing a 3 cost ally with 2 thwart and 2 health with no ability, which is really steep cost. Like, at that point, you're wishing it was a 2 cost ally. But I think overall, you're probably just going to be able to find the right situations to deck build this in. And in that case, if you just look at it as stun the villain or stun the enemy when you're playing this, it's really, really good. So Mirage is cool, but again, a little bit situational. Then we've got Pixie, which is a 2 cost ally, which is always exciting because that tends to be a really popular space for allies for people that are deck building. 2 cost, 2 health, 1 thwart, 2 attack, but 2 consequential damage on that attack. Response: after you play Pixie from your hand, add an X-Men ally from your discard pile to your hand. This is really, really good. For 2 cost allies, first of all, are just really, really good. It's just one of those things where having a chump blocker for 2 is always, and so far has just always been a really solid choice still. Not that you're wanting to include allies that, say, have no text box and it's just a 2 cost ally, but in general, having them in play, especially in leadership where you want to have allies in play and are benefiting from it, it's just a great chump blocker. Having a responsibility that is just from when that card enters play means that you don't have to hope that you're also triggering something with it. You can block whenever you want because you've already triggered that ability. You've already got the use out of Pixie. And in this case, the use is really good because you're getting an ally back from your discard pile, not shuffled into the deck, which is kind of normally what we see with cards coming out of the discard pile, but directly into your hand. That ally you might be able to play this turn. It might be really valuable. It might be something you got full use out of, and now you're going to get to play again. There's so much potential in that design space and on it, for that ability to be on a 2 cost ally that can also chump block for you. I think this will just have a lot of success in terms, or it will see a lot of success in the game. It'll be in a lot of decks, especially X-Men leadership decks. So really good card. Then we've got leadership skill. You know what? Now that I'm looking at this, I should have looked up ahead of time. I don't know if this is a reprint with just new artwork or not. I don't think it is, or otherwise I feel like they wouldn't have discussed it in the announcement article. But it could be. I honestly can't remember. There's so many cards in Marvel Champions, and I don't play a lot of the older heroes or decks very often. So if it is, I apologize. But let's talk about it anyways. 1 cost upgrade, leadership skill, uses 3 leadership counters, max 1 per player for this card. Interrupt: when an ally makes a basic thwart or basic attack action, remove 1 leadership counter from here. That ally gets +1 thwart and +1 attack for that action. This is just, it seems like a solid card. It's a really cheap upgrade to get into play. It's only 1. You get 3 uses out of it, which essentially means you're boosting, like say you boosted attack every time. You're getting +3 attack onto an ally, which maybe means that ally that only had, limited use is now going to get more mileage out. You don't have to use it on the same ally every time. You can spread it across. You can use it over multiple turns. I think this is just a solid card. I think we're getting these additional leadership and support cards, especially now that X-Men are being introduced and we're getting a bunch of X-Men cards, is really good. And the fact that this isn't limited to X-Men is also really cool. You can, deck build it into the other cards. That's one thing I've noticed we've seen a lot of is we've gotten a lot of cards that are specifically tied to X-Men, which people who maybe say aren't buying some of the new packs or are wanting to play their older heroes are left out a little bit because they look at it and say, well, even if I buy this pack, I can't really deck build with many of these cards if I'm choosing not to play X-Men. This is cool because you can use it across everything. So really cool card. I think it's really solid, and we'll probably see some play. Then we've got Uncanny X-Men, which I'm pretty sure is the name of a comic book line, if I'm not mistaken. It's a 3-cost support. Play under any player's control, but max 1 team card per player. That's the tag. This has the team tag. Each of your X-Men allies gets a +1 hit point. If each of your characters has the X-Men trait, each of your X-Men allies costs 1 fewer resource to play. This seems really, really good. If you have a situation where you've built an X-Men leadership deck and the goal is to get a whole bunch of X-Men allies into play and you got a bunch in your deck, the fact that all of them will cost 1 fewer resource to play is huge. And then on top of that, all of them get +1 hit points, which means their longevity goes through the roof as well. So really, really powerful card. And the fact that you can play this under any player's control means that if you're playing a team-up game or a multiplayer game where you're teaming up with someone else who's also doing an X-Men oriented deck, being able to assist them if you're in a situation where you don't need it just makes it for a stronger multiplayer game. Having that flexibility to help yourself, help your teammates is really cool. So I think this is really powerful. I think you're going to see this pop up in a lot of X-Men leadership decks. And I think this is going to be a card that many people build around where they say, I want to make a deck that has just a bunch of X-Men allies and I power them up with Uncanny X-Men as quick as I possibly can. Really cool card. Then we've got a basic ally, which is Forge, 2 cost, 2 health, 1 thwart, 1 attack. Response: after Forge enters play, search your deck and discard pile for an X-Men or X-Force support and add it to your hand. This, obviously being basic, has a lot of flexibility to be able to be included in a variety of different aspect decks and stuff like that. So really cool that way. It made me think right away. I actually haven't been paying attention to a lot of the tags on cards of how many support cards we have that actually have X-Force on them. Obviously, this is a big X-Men line. We've had a whole bunch of stuff with X-Men tag on it, and a lot of cards support the X-Men tag. I haven't been paying attention to how many we got that have X-Force. I'm pretty sure one of the heroes in Mutant Genesis has it or has cards that had it, so maybe there's been a lot more than I remember. I don't actually know how many X-Force support cards there are, but my first thought on this was maybe this is a little tease as well, that we could be getting a Deadpool pack in the very last 2 packs that are going to get announced for X-Men, and he'll have the X-Force tag along with X-Men or something. I don't know. I'm just excited for the potential for a Deadpool pack. I was talking with Braden about that and how much fun they could have in the design space with thematics, especially after what they did with Spider-Ham, with a character that breaks the 4th wall so often. So breaking the 4th wall of the game would be an interesting thing to try to tackle with a Deadpool hero. So that just got me excited. I could be completely off base here. It could just be, hey, there actually have been a ton of X-Force support cards and you're completely out to lunch. I don't know. That's just like my main takeaway from Forge, from looking at. I'm more excited about that than I think I am about Forge. And then we've got the X-Jet. So the X-Jet is a 3-cost support. Pretty simple. It says resource: exhaust the X-Jet, generate a wild resource for a player whose identity has the X-Men trait. Lots of really good flexibility here because, again, if you're playing multiplayer, and I like that we're getting these cards that support multiplayer specifically, you can generate this for yourself if you happen to be playing an X-Men hero, which you probably are if you're playing this card. But if you're playing with a bunch of people that are, you can generate this for yourself or you can generate it for anyone. That flexibility is really good. If anyone is in a situation where they're like, oh, if I just had one more resource, I could play everything I want in my hand, you can give it to them with the X-Jet, so that's really good. Okay, so we are getting, sorry, I got something in my eye here and I keep trying to like casually fix it without anyone noticing, but I feel like I've just been rubbing my eye for the entire last 2 cards. It's gone now, I'm good. So the next one we're gonna look at, this is the modular encounter set that's gonna be included in the pack. We're getting one just like we have with the other packs. This one is for a character called the Shadow King, which I'm not familiar with, but he looks pretty darn mean on the art here. Great art as well. 6 health, 3 scheme, 3 attack, pretty beefy. While a controlled minion is in play, the Shadow King cannot take damage. When revealed, search the encounter deck and discard pile for a copy of the possessed attachment and reveal it. So you're probably wondering what a controlled minion is, but you're probably also guessing, or have a good guess on what that is. So you can't really understand this card without looking at the other card that was revealed, which is Possessed. This is the attachment that it's referring to. This says treat attached ally as a controlled minion with a blank text box. Attached minion scheme is equal to its printed thwart, and it does not take consequential damage. When revealed, attach to the ally with the lowest thwart without possessed attached. If you cannot, this card gains surge. So essentially, this modular encounter set is about taking possession of your allies, turning them into minions against you, and then while those are in play, the Shadow King cannot take damage. So not only does he already have high health with 6 and really high scheme and attack as well, like the stat line all around is good, you can't do anything to him, or at least not damage him, until you've dealt with whatever possessed minion is now in play, which is, there's always going to be one whenever the Shadow King is revealed. It's a pretty cool mechanic, and that's the only 2 of the 5 cards that we got revealed, so it'll be interesting to see how the other ones play in with this possession mechanic, but I just like that as a modular encounter set, one completely built around this possession idea. Really cool for the game, and I can't wait to try it out. That is it. That is everything we had revealed for Storm. Obviously, we'll get more as we get closer to the release. There'll be leaks up probably, and you'll actually, when you have the pack in your hand, you'll find out everything that's in there. I'll have a full review when we get that later this year in the fall sometime. For anyone who didn't know, we are getting 2 packs at a time throughout. So we get Mutant Genesis with 2 hero packs released. Then we're doing 2 hero packs right after that again, which I believe is Wolverine and Storm. And then we're doing a final 2 hero packs, which have not been revealed yet. I don't know what they're going to be. There's a lot of X-Men to choose from. I'm pulling for Deadpool just because I think that would be the coolest one to see them tackle design-wise, but there's so many good possibilities out there. I mean, they're probably going to gravitate to whatever would interest them most from a design space, and there's probably so much to choose from. So that is Storm. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you again for the patience in me getting it out. I hope you enjoyed it. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.